Welcome to A2Council Update, a recap of the Ann Arbor City Council meeting on June 18, 2024. This meeting included comments and discussion about amendments to Affordable Housing Fund policy, zoning changes for the planned SouthTown development, annexation of 3 township islands, approval of a liquor license, and a resolution directing a report on the study of reparations. This is the voting chart for the council meeting on June 18, 2024. All agenda items were approved unanimously. You can find this voting chart and more information about this meeting at A2Council.com. Like and subscribe if you would like to see more content like this. The meeting included a presentation from Matt Carpenter of the Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority.
In May, we implemented our first ever express route between downtown Ann Arbor and downtown Ypsilanti, cutting the travel time by about 1/3 and bringing those two communities closer together. Very excited about Route 104. And in August, we will be expanding our span of service. So the hours will start earlier and end later, and we'll be increasing the frequencies on Saturdays and Sundays. We're also excited to be partnering with the Ann Arbor District Library, as we do every summer, to offer free weekend rides to riders with valid library cards as part of their summer games program. This goes from June 15th until August the 25th.
After introductory remarks, public comments, and staff explanations, Council discussed agenda items for a little over 30 minutes. 6 people signed up in advance to offer public comments. 4 people spoke to topics on the agenda. The consent agenda this week included 26 items and expenditures of about $6.8 million. Ahead of the meeting, 2 items were deleted from the consent agenda: a reallocation of American Rescue Plan Act funds and approval and acceptance of a grant for community-based crisis response. This item has been added to the next council meeting agenda. 1 item on the consent agenda was pulled for discussion. Council considered approval of policies for the use of affordable housing funds. These funds are collected as contributions from developers. Jennifer Hall, director of the city's Housing Commission, explained proposed changes to Affordable Housing Fund policy, as recommended by the city's Housing and Human Services Advisory Board.
These current proposed policy changes are being presented to you tonight after discussion by the HHSAB in anticipation of recent City Council approval of 3 developer contributions in lieu of including affordable housing on site. If all of these projects are built, the contributions actually come into the fund after certificates of occupancy, and so they have to be built first before the contribution happens. The total would be about $18.5 million. The HHSAB believes that the priority needs to be the housing development, and the funds were never used for rental subsidies, so that was something they felt comfortable removing. Both the city and the Housing Commission, through the city's funding, provide several million dollars annually for nonprofit operating support for housing and other services from the general fund, from the rebate from the county mental health and sheriff millage, as well as the state marijuana excise tax rebate. So that didn't seem to be as urgent of a need anymore.
The Affordable Housing Fund policy explains how the payments received from developers can provide low-interest loans, gap financing, deferred loans, or other financial assistance. The fund subsidizes the development of housing that is temporarily affordable for periods of time that vary. For example, housing units subsidized in new developments must remain affordable for 30 years. For rehabilitation projects, the fund can subsidize up to $15,000 per unit for housing that remains affordable for a period of 5 years. Council discussed the new policy for about 2 minutes.
Just want to reinforce the statement that there are so few funds dedicated to permanent support, the development of permanent supportive housing here in the community, and the potential for this fund to grow and the commitments that we're receiving for these new funds, we really hope to see those turn to new units.
When we have new development, not only does it help us with our current tax base and our ongoing costs and services, it also helps us build these units.
Council unanimously approved the Affordable Housing Fund policies. Earlier in the meeting, the agenda was amended so that a closed session with attorneys could occur right after the consent agenda. The purpose of the closed session was described as including, but not limited to, labor negotiation strategy, the purchase or lease of real property, pending litigation, and attorney-client privileged communication. Council was in closed session for approximately 30 minutes. After it returned to open session, Council considered an amendment to zoning terms for a proposed development at State and Stimson called SouthTown. In August 2023, City Council unanimously approved a rezoning of the city block bounded by White Street, Henry Street, State, and Stimson. The neighborhood on this block will be removed and replaced with a new development called SouthTown. The 2023 rezoning of this block to C1AR included conditions: limits on the building height, limits on the amount of parking, and limits on the number of dedicated STR or Airbnb units. This week, Council considered an amendment to the fourth condition, which prohibited natural gas connections except for emergency backup. The proposed amendment will remove the prohibition on natural gas connections and sets targeted goals for reduced carbon intensity. The developer's success in achieving these goals will be reported upon request. The developer plans to make use of a product called renewable natural gas, if it is commercially available. The developer then plans to transition to green hydrogen or blue hydrogen, if commercially available. The developer then plans to employ carbon capture technology, which is not yet commercially available. If the proposed plan for reduced carbon intensity fails, the developer will buy carbon offsets. At the May meeting of the Planning Commission, the developer, Heidi Posher, explained the requested amendment.
It will involve fuel cells that run on renewable natural gas, solar, battery storage, a geothermal system, and a vehicle-to-grid charging system. All of those, what we call generation assets or storage assets, will be monitored by a microgrid controller. It'll have a 24/7 real-time insight into what's happening with the assets, and we will configure various programs in terms of what our outcome objectives are. Most of those will relate to sustainability or reliability. They'll integrate with the building system. You know, Missy Stoltz makes a point that there's plenty of feedstock available where that came from. So, you know, like maybe we'll do a project with the city to do some other form of digester.
City staff and planning commissioners discussed the change and asked questions.
I'm sure the Poshers are as well. They might be more able to answer technical fuel cell questions.
I sure hope so. Otherwise, we're all in trouble. Thanks, Alexa.
Yeah, just to make sure that in the future, when renewable natural gas is not, right when it's green hydrogen or what, like whatever our.
Missy and I might do something crazy and just partner with the wastewater facility. And
Right.
like our biggest problem will be the supply chain.
This is super cool. I understand like less than 50% of it, but like I'm really excited to hear like innovations and, you know, sustainability.
In May, the Planning Commission unanimously approved the amended conditions. At this week's meeting, a public commenter spoke to the issue.
Right after you approved SouthTown, developer 4M, run by Heidi Posher, donated $5,000 to the mayor's PAC and has also donated roughly $4K more to other Team Taylor campaigns, and that those optics weren't good. It is important to note the widely held view, particularly among prominent progressive Democrats like Bernie Sanders, that campaign donations from corporations and PACs have a corrosive effect on policy decisions by enabling access and subtly influencing policy on items that directly affect the donors. When both Bernie Sanders and scholars say campaign money can be corrosive, you shouldn't disparage folks who suggest that could be true here. Just remember, you're overseeing negotiations for a multi-million-dollar project. Maybe this hydrogen fuel cell tech isn't ready. Maybe it's greenwashing. Please talk to some experts.
The head of the city's Sustainability and Innovations Department explained the amendment.
I know our discussion today is focusing on the fuel cell element of the project, but I would be remiss from a sustainability standpoint to not acknowledge the deep energy efficiency, the on-site solar, the on-site geothermal, the limited parking. And when I spoke with the developer about this project, which I did have opportunity to do many times, one of the concerns that they raised about a traditional connection to the DT grid was their concern about reliability. The developer has agreed to move off of RNG as quickly as possible and move to green hydrogen to power that fuel cell. So put another way, I view this project as being largely in support of our sustainability goals and fully in support of our innovation goals.
Council discussed it for about 10 minutes.
Put simply, This amendment allows a gas connection in exchange for setting an emissions reduction standard for the SouthTown project. The microgrid must reduce SouthTown's carbon intensity from energy usage by no less than 60%.
How are we going to be looking at this to get an accurate accounting of the carbon impact?
This is new in many ways, and so we are going to have to learn. And candidly, this is part of the innovation work in our office, is figuring out exactly how are we going to determine the impact of these practices. So I believe the developer has thoughts on what that could look like too, but I don't want to pretend that I can tell you right now exactly all of the details of that accounting methodology.
Council unanimously approved at first reading the amendment to zoning conditions in order to allow natural gas connections at SouthTown. At a future meeting, this amendment will be the subject of a public hearing and final approval at second reading. After brief introductions, Council unanimously approved the annexation of 3 township islands at Algibe Way, East Huron River Drive, and Huntington Place. After a brief introduction, Council unanimously approved a liquor license for a restaurant at 221 West Liberty. Finally, Council considered a resolution directing the city administrator to find funding for a feasibility study on a reparations program to remediate historical injustices and discrimination against Black residents of Ann Arbor. Earlier in the evening, public commenters spoke in support.
I come today with a heartfelt plea for justice and healing for the Black families and Black business owners who were displaced, redlined, tricked, bamboozled, and forced to sell their homes and businesses for pennies on the dollar, otherwise excluded from economic opportunities within the city.
I hope there could be an actual repair resolution on the City Council agenda before the end of the year. This is, I think you all know, is the last year of the United Nations decade for people of African descent. There's a question all over the country and all over the world, and it should certainly find a resolution here in Ann Arbor.
Council read statements in support for about 10 minutes.
This process involves looking into our city's history, confronting the uncomfortable truths, and seeking justice for those who have been wronged. This resolution is a step towards that justice. By hiring a consultant to thoroughly investigate Ann Arbor's history and the feasibility of reparations, we are committing to a process of learning, confronting, and ultimately healing as a community.
The resolution to study a reparations program represents a first step in the city officially recording the history of injustices felt by Ann Arbor's Black residents and outlining steps for repair. The resolution directs the administrator to find a funding source for consultants to study the feasibility of a program.
This resolution gives us the ability to conduct a study and produce an impact report detailing the harms perpetuated against Black Americans and potentially explore what we can do, even in a small way, to repay those most impacted.
This initiative, I believe, reflects our city's commitment to ensuring that all citizens have equal access to housing, employment, healthcare, and economic opportunities, and are not disproportionately impacted by policing.
I'm really grateful for our colleagues speaking to, historical wrongs.
The study will hopefully be an important expression of community candor, giving us an opportunity for contrition, reconciliation, and creation.
Council unanimously approved the resolution directing the city administrator to find funding for a consultant to study the feasibility of a municipal reparations program. The meeting adjourned before 9 p.m. without any further public comment. For more details about this meeting, visit A2Council.com.
Welcome to this week's A2Council Moment of Zen.
The objective, though, is to get below the line of sustainability, and there are many, many reasons to do that. It's an opportunity in terms of sustainability. It's an opportunity for our company as well in terms of pushing the envelope in terms of creating value. And it doesn't take very long in terms of studying the climate economy to understand how true that is. So it's both an objective in terms of meeting the objectives of the city, but it's also an objective for good business and figuring out ways to take advantage of the climate economy, and that's what I feel like we're doing.